Gaming is a massive field with tons of projects coming out every single month. Now, naturally, not everything is going to be amazing, but sometimes you have to wonder how a game made it out the door in the first place. You have to know your audience in the gaming industry, and today we're going to talk about games, well, they turn their entire audience against them. So you let me know which of these 10 games pissed you off the most, drop a like, and let's start with a relatively recent one. Battlefield 2042. Now, up until, well, okay, let me rethink that. Battlefield's always been a very inconsistent game for the last few decades, right? Battlefield 4, amazing, but it had one of the worst launches in gaming history. Battlefield 1, also an excellent game, but many lifetime fans didn't feel it had the longevity that older Battlefield games had. Battlefield 5, extremely disappointing on launch day due to severe lack of content and abundance of technical oversights. The franchise needed a solid return to form. They did, and that's what Battlefield 2042 was promised to be. What seemed like a slam dunk idea quickly turned into the most hated thing in the gaming community. 2042 was released in shambles. Countless game-breaking bugs, glitches, but even if all the bugs were fixed, the game was not well received. There were countless changes made to the core Battlefield formula for seemingly no good reason, and the new gameplay loop of 2042 was heavily criticized by longtime players. What seemed like an attempt to capture a new audience only served to push the existing audience farther away, and since the game on launch day was such a joke, they didn't pull any new players in. BF 2042 was a complete faceplant for the Battlefield franchise, and I honestly wouldn't be shocked at all if EA starts telling DICE to work on other things and let the franchise sit for a while. I don't want Battlefield to go the way of Medal of Honor, but it's starting to look like that is what's going to happen. At number 9, and this one hurts me deep, Halo Infinite. Speaking of disappointing FPS franchises, Halo Infinite was one of the most heartbreaking games of 2021 because of how much potential it had. Following the release of the multiplayer, people were hooked on it. The free-to-play model did amazing for player counts and player retention. During the first couple weeks of Halo Infinite, we all thought Halo was going to make the comeback that 343 was promising, but as time went on, the mood turned sour. The launch version of Halo Infinite wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to keep people optimistic once patches came out and changes were made. But that was the issue. Those patches, they weren't coming. 343 would take weeks to release a new patch, and the content drought hit incredibly hard. There was almost nothing to do in Infinite. On top of all the really bad progression system stuff, it started pushing people away. What could have been amazing, could have been an amazing comeback story, just got it more embarrassing over time, and 343 continued to miss roadmap goals. I mean, indefinitely delayed features promised at launch, frequently just to go radio silent for a week or two. Halo Infinite's foundation, it's good, but the way it's been handled, it's embarrassing. And for longtime Halo fans, this was the final straw. 343 had definitely pushed away a lot of people after Halo 3 and Halo Reach back in the day, and that's kind of sad. At number 8, Diablo 3. With how much people hated Diablo Immortal, it's easy to forget just how bad Diablo 3's launch went as well. Now, obviously, 3 ended up being a rather loved game, and it's nowhere near as bad as Immortal, but those who were around during the launch window, you know why it's here today. Upon launch, Diablo 3 could not be played offline, which was a controversy on its own, but on top of that horrible design choice, Blizzard servers were not prepared for the amount of people logging in, and they ended up completely breaking, meaning Diablo 3 was literally unplayable on launch day. Blizzard got a lot of flack for this, and while they did eventually fix the server issues, the fact that the developers of a game could just shut off your access to it whenever they wanted to made a lot of people pissed off with how Blizzard was handling their digital distribution. Remember, this was in 2012. Things got so much worse in a very short amount of time. Here we go. Train is rolling. At number 7, Diablo Immortal. I mean, the most recent example of Blizzard pissing everybody off. Following the near-decade wait for the new Diablo game, Blizzard announced a free-to-play mobile spin-off. Yeah. Interestingly, everybody's most common fear of free mobile games was present in Diablo Immortal, almost like Blizzard was actively trying to make the worst thing imaginable. Immortal was insultingly pay to win and a massive slap in the face to fans of the series. Blizzard's rush to announce Diablo 4 was likely just an attempt to assure Diablo fans that something was in the works. And honestly, if Diablo 4 had been announced sometime before Immortal, the controversy likely wouldn't have been nearly as severe. But Blizzard has a history of putting their foot in their mouth, and believe it or not, this isn't their last entry. Here we go. Warcraft 3 Reforged. Now, Warcraft 3 was one of the most influential PC games of its time. Real-time strategy game. It's where a lot of initial World of Warcraft players were introduced to the series, and the way the game was handled post-launch helped further establish Blizzard as one of the titans of PC gaming. Now we fast forward to the era of remakes and remasters. and Blizzard unsurprisingly announced a remake of Warcraft 3 for modern PCs in 2018. 2 years after the announcement, Warcraft 3 Reforged launched, and the fans immediately set their sights on Blizzard once again. So what did they do this time? Well, for starters, Warcraft 3 Reforged was full of bugs, full of glitches, but also a laundry list of broken promises from the previous promotional material in the demos. Tons of features promised for launch day, gone. Ghosted. The new user interface, not good. Ton of gameplay elements were changed for seemingly no reason. The animations were criticized. Blizzard seemed to have promised very different things early in the game's development, resulting in a demo that looked much more polished, much more cinematic than the final product. Warcraft 3 Reforged was briefly the worst rated game on Metacritic, and to this day, it only managed to pull off a 0.6 user score. Now they're going to get really bad. Metal Gear Survive. Metal Gear Solid is one of the most critically acclaimed and influential franchises in gaming history. 35 years. Stealth series completely redefined the genre, helped give video games a better reputation as storytelling tools. But after a long-running feud between the series creator and the publisher ended in two parting ways, the rights to the franchise remain with the publisher. That's scary. The creative team was kicked out, and I think you can guess where this went. Metal Gear Survive. Shallow, rushed, built from the Metal Gear Solid 5's assets, and fans were pissed. Metal Gear Survive was such an obvious example of a publisher cashing in on one of their properties after the main creative heads leave, and for such a legendary series, the fans were not forgiving. It was ripped apart by gamers, it was ripped apart by critics, and it was the last new Metal Gear project to ever be released. At number 4, Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered. Before I say anything else, let me first say that Remastered is actually a solid game. It's a very faithful recreation of COD 4's campaign, and while a few things change about the multiplayer, still has a high-tier Call of Duty experience factor to me, especially considering that it launched 3 years into the jetpack era and people were desperate for something more old school. But unfortunately, the way Modern Warfare Remastered was distributed, it pissed people off. Things only got worse as time went on. Modern Warfare Remastered launched on the same day as Infinite Warfare in November of 2016, but the only way for you to get it was buying the deluxe edition of IW, which was $80. Many people in the COD community, well, they were completely disinterested in Infinite Warfare, so asking them to drop $80 on a remaster, that was a big slap across the face. Then a few months after launch, Activision finally released it on its own for $40. On top of all that, the decision was also made to remaster the original game's DLC and try to sell it for more than it was initially released for. I mean, Modern Warfare Remastered was one controversy after another one, and I mean, it's one of the most hated games in the entire franchise for that reason alone, which sucks because it was a good game. At number 3, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. No matter how well the Pokemon games sell, they always manage to piss people off. Scarlet and Violet was released in late 2022 for the Switch and quickly got a giant chunk of the Pokemon community rallying against it for just how many corners it cut compared to previous mainline Pokemon games. On top of the content problems, Scarlet and Violet was one of the buggiest Nintendo exclusives to come out in recent years, featuring a ton of massive visual glitches, animations that you have no idea what's going on. It was a big disappointment to Pokemon fans everywhere. What could have been an amazing evolution for the Pokemon franchise ended up being a cheap cash grab that pushed a lot of players right out the door. At number 2, GTA, the Trilogy Definitive Edition. Speaking of games that push their entire community out the door, Rockstar Games really needed the GTA Trilogy to be good. Now, Rockstar is an incredibly successful studio. The GTA community, though, they're getting antsy for something new, which is completely understandable since the last GTA game came out a decade ago. When you're playing the same game for nearly a decade, it's completely fair to want something new. And while Rockstar has confirmed they're hard at work on the new GTA 6, the remastered trilogy was kind of supposed to be a way to hold us over, bridge the gap. Remastered versions of GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas sounds like a home run. It wasn't. The art style looked ugly in some places. A lot of people thought the original graphics looked better. That's sad. On top of that, the game had hundreds of bugs on day one, maybe thousands, many of which completely broke the immersion or just made the game borderline unplayable. The fact that this game even made it out the door, it's amazing. And then Rockstar spent 5 months trying to make amends with the community. No amount of patches could erase a bad launch from an internet's history, and the last game on today's list, well, that embodies that forever. Let's get into the PlayStation 5 monthly giveaway. Like I said earlier, all you have to do is like the video, be subscribed to the channel with those notifications fully turned on, and you have a chance to win the monthly PlayStation 5 here on the channel. Now, I need you to do something really important. Leave me a comment on the channel. Include your Twitter handle because we have to be able to contact the winner at the end of the month, and we'll get you your PlayStation 5. At number 1 today, Cyberpunk 2077, perhaps the biggest disappointment in gaming history, one of the most hyped RPGs of all time, and for good reason. It was the latest game from CD Projekt Red, whose last RPG was The Witcher 3, widely seen as one of the best games ever made. Cyberpunk had been in development for a long time, and as a follow-up to The Witcher 3 and as a fascinating new RPG in its own right, it was one of the most talked about games in the world. Early gameplay footage looked good, and everything was looking like Cyberpunk would be the biggest game of the year. Unfortunately, it wasn't all cracked up how it was supposed to be. It barely even functioned on launch day. It got to the point that the console versions had to be delisted for further testing, and the Steam version quickly started getting flooded with negative user reviews. Cyberpunk was a complete disaster. Total embarrassment for the developers who clearly weren't finished on working on it when it went live. Since its launch, it's been patched up to a pretty impressive degree, and it's actually a solid game. But that initial launch will never be forgotten. This truly might be the worst AAA game launch of all time, and for that, that's big. I mean, it really is, because there's been some bad ones. But I'm going to give it the #1 spot on today's list. So let me know one game that didn't make the list that pissed you off, and I'll see you guys soon.